Welcome to Solutions Rising. I'm Rachel Branch, and once again, I am so honored to welcome Dr. Gloria Caballero Roca, an educator, an amazing activist, and cares about peace and justice and all the things that are so very important in a meaningful life. And we are going to talk on this program about education. And we both have a lot we care about what is going on in our educational system. Gloria, Dr. Gloria, it was recently, this past year, elected as a Holyoke School Committee member. She and I share so much background together, and I am just delighted and honored that she is here again.
Thank you so much, Ms. Rachel Branch, for the invitation. Thanks for having me on again. Thanks always.
Oh, yes, and I hope many more times we will share the things that are so important to what we believe in our world, in the world. So do you think we ought to start off maybe generally talking about education in the United States and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and then go from there on our views? And I'm going to follow wherever you lead on this program.
Well, let's talk about, why is education important? Not only the Commonwealth or in Holyoke, or it's education in general. I guess there's so many ways to define what is to be educated as opposed to what is to get an education. I come from a country where I had the opportunity to receive free education through college. Then moving here, education is not available to everybody. It's become a luxury when it should be a human right for everyone and anybody who who wants to go to school or goes back to school, anything. So when we talk about education, it's not only college education. There are people who have those instructions from a college perspective, but then are not necessarily educated when it comes to manners, politeness, or diplomacy, and ways to sort of simply go back and forth with ideas. And I think that as a human right, education should be something that is available, and not only available, but it should be of quality.
May I ask you, Dr. Caballero Roca has 2 master's degrees and 2 doctorates. Would you tell our audience about how and where you got the master's degrees and your doctorates? And I totally agree with you. Everybody should be able to get as much education as possible. And I think personally we are failing terribly in our educational system in this country. If I may say. I would like you to tell your story too.
I came to the United States in 1997, and I was fortunate enough that I had an education in Cuba. I was trained to be a professional translator and interpreter for 5 years, and I taught English and techniques of translation and interpretation at college level there for 7 years prior to coming to the States. So coming with the language and in some ways a degree that opened up this world to me, I got a job at Milton Academy, Milton, Massachusetts. So I taught Spanish there for 2 years and wanted to go back to teaching at college level. So the University of Massachusetts in Amherst opened up their arms to me and say, yes, you can come here, do your studies, and I also taught there Spanish and Portuguese. So there I did my master's degree in Hispanic literature and culture, and then I did a PhD in Latin American and Portuguese literature and cultures. Those were 8 long years of study, research, traveling, doing presentations at international conferences about the results of my studies.
Were you given a scholarship at the University of Massachusetts Amherst?
Yes, they offered me a TA-ship, and also they gave me a lot of support, grants for travel, to go abroad. What else? They gave me 2 more years of support when I went to Spain to study part of my master's degree. Then they gave me a university award at the end before I wrote my dissertation. So that was between the University of Massachusetts and the Portuguese embassy. They supported me to spend a year in Lisbon doing research on José Saramago, who was one of the authors that I studied. So that was a lot of support, but noting that I was also a good student. I became really focused, and I was already a mom. I was in my 30s, and everything went well. I was lucky enough, and I don't have to be lucky enough. I think everybody should have the right to have this opportunity. But in my case, it happened that I decided to just do it. That was my passion. And 2 years after I graduated, I went to Spain because they also had a program, a master's and PhD program. But this was through Erasmus Mundus. This is a program that is available, and I'm saying it here so that everyone go online and find out what Erasmus Mundus is. It is a consortium of over 8 universities in Europe, where you start with one university and then you rotate, and this is under the umbrella of GEMMA. And GEMMA, GEMMA, is the Gender Studies, Genders and Women's Studies. And they have a master's degree, and if you apply for scholarship, they give you a scholarship of 2 years. You start in Spain, as I did, and then I rotated and went to Poland. So I studied part of my master's degree at Łódź University. We say Lodz here in the United States. So I studied there. Once I finished a master's degree, I went back to Spain, and I did from here, and between Spain and the United States, my PhD. That was on autoethnography, sociology, the study of diaspora, gender, and diversity.
That's your second
That's
PhD?
the second PhD. Yes, I was Afro-Cuban embodiment and African diaspora under the umbrella of autoethnography. So there was interviews, there was open interviews, a lot of reflections as to who I am, where I come from, where my country, comes from, the people of my country, the foreign affairs and interrelationships of all kinds of human beings on the earth, our interconnectedness and the need to continue cultivating cultural humility, which is also checking on yourself, that you don't know everything about the other person or about the other culture. We need to keep learning and understanding and really making sure that we build a world around us that is fair, that is just for everybody. So it is a much more complex dissertation and studies, but yes, that's how I did my 2 PhDs and my 2 master's degrees. In total, it took me 14 years, and I started when I was 34, and I finished when I was 42.
That's an amazing story, but
Yeah.
that's also a journey and a trajectory of where education and any student trying to reach their full potential should be able to follow that
Yeah.
journey
Yes.
and receive the educational support that they deserve.
They
And
deserve.
it's a human right. It
Yes.
is a human right.
It is a
And
human
of course,
right.
education changes your whole life because it opens up exposure and avenues you never would have had.
Yes.
Not
then-
being exposed or allowed to have an education.
Yeah, but then I realized that it also comes with privilege. I had the privilege of owning a house. I was a homeowner. I was not renting like most of my neighbors in Holyoke. So 66 of us in Holyoke rent. And 88% of those rental units belong to corporations. Many of those children, and family live, this is an underfunded community, depressed economy. Many of them live from paycheck to paycheck, or lost their jobs during COVID, or are working 2 or 3 jobs underpaid. So these are homes that need ways to find out creatively. These are parents who live in these kinds of conditions that have to resort to different means and avenues to support their children. So that's the privilege that I had already covered. having a means of transportation, I was able to go back and forth. But if you cannot have you don't have a means of transport to bring your children to extracurricular activities or just bring your children to school, because in Holyoke we also had a problem with busing our children because of lack of transportation for the school buses. If you still have, now there is upcoming, the Affordable Connectivity Program that is going to be shut down in Holyoke and in many of low-income homes, those children and families are going to lose the resources from which they can draw on more information. If you don't have access to internet, how are you going to do some research? Go to Google Search or go Google Scholar and expand your horizon as to, okay, what is someone else saying about this topic that I am doing research on? Or how do I go to YouTube and get that tutorial on math or reading or writing?
And of course, I have been personally affected by the Affordable Connectivity Program, and I think from the battle that I fought, and I did win that battle against Comcast Charter Communications doing business as Spectrum. That is a federal program that allows $30 or whatever the rate is a month to low-income people. And of course, that covers disabled, low-income people, to have the internet. And to have fought that, I did win that battle. But there are thousands of people who have rights to that government program, which adds up to $360. It's $30 a month. So it's $360 a year. That's a real benefit for low-income people.
Yes.
And if you have children, to have free internet is an educational necessity today.
Yes.
Absolutely a necessity today.
So the schools in Holyoke have been under receivership since 2015.
And how did that happen?
Well, they said that the students were underperforming.
According
so very
to
low
what
score.
standards?
Well,
I think
low scores, in math, in literature, in reading and writing. So the students were not doing well. The same with MCAS. So now if they take away that venue through which they can really study, going to YouTube and finding out, okay, where is it that I can find more resources? Imagine if they are underperforming, this program is going to really disenfranchise all these families, to have the right to just do their work, their homework, or parents to find some support for their children.
Of course, my understanding is that the ACP program is being cut because, they said COVID has gone away, President.
Yeah.
COVID has not gone away, but the fact remains low-income people still need access to the internet, and that should have just transferred right into continuing the Affordable Connectivity Program for educational purposes, for our young people as part of their educational tools.
Exactly, yes. And it is something that is affecting not only children, but also senior people and everybody in the community. So I also think that is one of the reasons why we are underperforming. But we cannot forget about the conditions in which these children live. We have a housing crisis. We also have a unemployment crisis in Holyoke. We have problems with infrastructure in our city. We have problems communicating with our elected officials because not everyone is on the same page. So all that also contributes to underperformances in our classrooms. If you go to visit those homes, some of them, you have mold, there's flooding, there's so much going on. Landlords that don't care about the living conditions of many of our residents. That impacts also the way our children, are going to perform in our schools. And
it's one of the things when I talk about housing, I say TAPE, transparency, accountability, protection, and enforcement. We need those 4 ingredients from our government of elected officials who will not get out of office so we could begin to have a representative government. And I think at this stage in our country, with what I understand are more homeless than we have ever had, all those impact the education of young people.
Yes.
And there seems to be no remedy or finding the remedy. People need to run for office. I'm delighted that you were a candidate for school committee and were elected. But you keep standing up. We need other people in the community to stand up and telling entrenched people in public office who are treating it like a job, you need to get out. It's supposed to be public service.
Yes, it is a
And
public service.
The worst
position.
connection is what it is doing to our children
Yes,
and their
yes.
lives.
And also, when we talk about education, it's not only that everyone has to go to college.
No.
Now, we need to talk about schools of trades, okay? Hands-on experiments and projects and experiences and teaching. We need to implement more arts programs in our schools.
Well, I remember, and of course, you know, I was on a school committee also, and STEM school, science, technology, engineering, and math. But you and I both believe it needs to be STEAM.
Yes.
And I also, I think
Being
you know
science-
how I feel about, yes. When I was in high school, it was called trade school, and like those people were not as smart if they weren't in college preparatory. That's
Yes.
absolutely absurd.
Yes.
And of course, I have great disregard for MCAS. I think that program needs to be abandoned. No student should be taught to. It should be taught to attest
Yes.
children. That is not teaching them.
No. And
Critical thinking and what their aspirations are, what their potential is. You and I think agree pretty
Yes.
much on that.
Completely. One of those meetings, well, the student representatives, one of them is always stressing the fact that MCAS just brings more anxiety to the students, depression. Many of them are taking a lot of, self-medicating themselves to just stay on and be able to pass those MCAS exams, which for me also they make no sense at all. Why are we pushing the envelope only? You have to know how to do multiple answer, tests instead of how do you analyze this problem? Are you learning to be a problem solver, solving person? Are you becoming someone that can understand abstract ideas? How are we reinforcing those aspects in our education? That is being abandoned, even though there's so many good programs in Holyoke that are being also put into place, like the ethnic studies. I do believe that the schools or the school district should do more in terms of reaching out into the community, door knocking, finding out about what's happening. There's so much mental health issues in my community, and it also affects students, of course. And it's hard when you walk out of school and you see that right across from you there's a liquor store. And around that liquor store you see people panhandling and you see the use of all kinds of substances. And you see the infrastructure that sidewalks are not being paved the right way, et cetera, et cetera. When you see all that around you, you believe in a city that is not taking care of yourself, that in disregard of the people who live in that city. And that is also part of our education,
And for children and students, just to be able to let their minds explore.
And wonder.
And the joy of, the joy of wonder. And,
Yes.
of course, that comes to like critical thinking. Teaching children how to think.
Yes.
But the one qualification of MCAS that just really infuriates me is you cannot graduate from high school if you do not pass the MCAS. Now, that one step, that is absolutely outrageous to me.
It is. It is outrageous.
Students, that is not about what education I think, is supposed to be. And you want children individually to reach their potential. You want to see them have teachers who are enjoying, instead of having to teach to a test, enjoying the fruits of the positions they've taken because they love being able to guide a student to become whatever they're supposed to become.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
how hard is that to understand?
It is hard when you see paraprofessionals rallying, because they're getting paid such low wages. It's hard when you see teachers just quitting because of the lack of discipline inside the classroom. But you have a student body that is coming from places that we just described, stressed parents, housing conditions that are unlivable, slum landlords, they don't care about if you have mice infection in your house, roach infection, and it is going on and on in our city. I
But you
wonder,
have a lot of elected officials who are not really dealing with the depth of what the problem is.
yes, and this
So
is,
if you have money for studies, my goodness, you know what needs to be done.
yes,
And I believe in rehabilitation. There's a lot of rehabilitation that could go on. I've said Habitat for Rehabilitation. There are all kinds of things. We have all kinds of money for studies and commissions, but not the money to get down to the root of the problem. 'Cause,
exactly.
gee, that might be too hard to take some of that money and put it where it's needed.
Yes, that's called downstreaming.
Oh,
The source is here, the problem, and here's how it flows. The stream is flowing down, right? So we are trying to solve, try to fish here, and get away all these rotten things and the algae, but we are not going to the source. Where is that problem, stemming from? And this is where the work needs to
and the
to
source
start.
is looking at that child, that young person, that student,
Yes.
and seeing they're hungry, they
Yes.
don't have safe housing,
No.
they don't have safe neighborhoods.
Yes, yes.
They're frightened,
They're frightened.
and they're
Yeah.
surrounded by drug dealers, and now we have all kinds of like cannabis stores and
Yeah.
liquor stores, and gee,
Yeah.
what
It's
kind of picture is that creating for that young person?
well, it's a picture of and it is chronic in the entire state of Massachusetts, of chronic absenteeism. They don't want to go to school. They find it more exhilarating, perhaps hanging out outside the school, or even staying at home, looking at a tablet, or hanging out with your friends on WhatsApp or TikTok, or these kinds of new ways of socializing, right? So, and also you put on top of that the all the stress of the MCAS, it's a mental health issue, all the depression. Who wants to go to school where you just being told you have to learn from A to B and not A, B, C, D? You know what I'm saying? And then you even have teachers who are told how to teach, because remember, this is a school, these are schools that are under receivership. We have lost total control of our schools in Holyoke. We are not the ones in control of what is being taught or the way it's being taught, or what are the social determinants, that really influence the underperformance of our
What does
students.
it take to bring a school out of receivership? Who's preparing those guidelines?
So there is a commissioner in Boston that is the one that is overseeing the process of how the schools are doing, all the statistics, and apparently
Power in the hands of one person again?
that's a lot of power, yes. But then the commissioner recently resigned, and there is now an interim commissioner, and hopefully we will find ways to meet with those persons. And I keep saying, well, come to our city, look at us as human beings, look at our problems, and also validate the steps that we have, the things that we have accomplished so far. Because it is also true that there are things that have been improving, that are improving, but not necessarily satisfying the demands of the commissioner to say, okay, now you are on your own, and we no longer have to, do the restructuring or tell you how what to do in your schools.
And of
so
course-
it's been a constant battle back and forth. It's a community who wants to regain control. It is also real, tangible things that we need to solve in our own city,
And
like
it
I
seems
say,
like
infrastructure.
you as a school committee member and other adults in the room, parents, teachers, but also the students should have a say. They
Yes.
should be part of the
Conversation.
representation and the conversation
Yes.
and listened to.
Yes.
Don't you believe?
I do. I do. Within the school committee, there is always the student representative, but I think that voice needs to be more diverse. Not only one student, there should be. When I ran for mayor, like you did in 2021, and one of my proposals, one that was in my platform, was to have a youth city council, a youth council, I should
Yeah.
say, where every student, at least one or two young people from each student should be a part of the decision making inside the city hall, because it is not only the schools, it's their city, it's their streets, it's their safety nets. It's also the food they eat inside those schools that are not conducive to a real good education. When you have food that is being ordered, that is being frozen and then defrozen and then warm, and you eat things that are not elaborate with natural ingredients, then it is also a problem when you sit down and try to study because you don't like the food and because you didn't have lunch, and because you have to bring your own food to school. So it's a multi-dimensional problem that really
And can be attacked on
encompasses.
all
Oh,
sides.
please, yes. We have
Yes,
money
yes.
for so much, for so many things. We need to invest in these kinds of communities. And it's not only Holyoke, it's also many communities in Boston.
Yes.
And it's a demographics that keeps repeating. Underfunded cities, low income, Latino, Latinas, and Black people, poor working class people. We keep getting, bearing the brunt of a system that is failing us.
Dr. Caballero Roca, would you please come back again on Solutions Rising and continue this conversation? There is just so much that we can talk about. And I want to thank you again for being my guest. And I will keep asking you to join me again because they're such in-depth and really serious and important conversations for you and I to have. Do you have a quick final thought?
Thank you so much, Ms. Rachel Blanche, for always inviting me. I think education is a human right. I think that through education is when we find a real freedom. We don't need to be rich materially. We need to be rich in the way we understand the world, in our capacity to really build, community through education, educating one another. And it's not a luxury, and it doesn't have to be something that is unattainable. Thank
And I
you.
would also say to encourage your children to go to the library.
Yes.
I spent so much of my time in the
Yes.
library. And as usual, at the end of each program, if each one of us picked up one problem and solved it, imagine the incredible view we would all have of Solutions Rising. Thank you to my guest, Dr. Gloria Caballero Roca. Please be part of the solution and join us again for another Solutions Rising program. Thank you.